Hi cookie friends, welcome! We're going to have so much fun decorating cookies together today. My name's Denise, I'm the owner of D is for Delicious, and I'm so excited to have you. So we're going to dive into our cookie kits in just a moment, but a few things I'd love for you to grab first. Please make sure you have some sort of surface to work on. I have a piece of parchment paper here, but you can use a cookie tray or even some paper towels. Grab a pair of scissors, some toothpicks to have on hand, and also some napkins or paper towels. Also, it's great to wash your hands because we're going to be touching all these cookies. So at any point in the video, please be sure to press pause if there's anything you need to grab or anything that you need to catch up on. But why don't we get started by unboxing everything in our kits. So we're going to take out all the supplies, and we've got icing in here and our cookies. We have a container of sprinkles. This is our practice sheet that we're going to start with soon, and some extra piping bags. And then we can just set these big boxes aside, get those out of the way. That's where the cookies can go afterwards if you're going to let them dry before eating them. All right, so first things first. What I always like to do at the beginning of class is go over the process that we'll be covering. So the first step in our process today is we're going to do this practice sheet, and then we're going to go step by step through the cookies. We're going to outline the cookies, and then flood the cookies, and then detail the cookies. So I like to go over how we hold the piping bags so that you can have good control as you use them. The icing is all in the tipless bags here. And what I'd like for you to do is first just watch how we're gonna hold the bag before we trim the bag at all. I want to show you that there's this little bit of tape at the top, and we're gonna put that tape in between our thumb and our pointer finger. And so we're gonna be holding the top of the piping bag with our dominant hand, the hand that you write with. So since I'm right-handed, that's where I'm holding at the top here. And my other hand is going to kind of help hold it steady as I work. So now that we know how to hold the bag, we're going to trim the bag just a little bit. I want you to do the tiniest little snip. It's always easier to trim off more as needed. So just the littlest snip. It's just enough to cover the lines here. And then I'm going to hold the bag and apply the pressure with my right hand. And my other hand will help just hold it steady. I'm squeezing as I go. And I drag the stream of icing behind my hand. So it's very important to not touch the tip of your bag to the surface. It's actually hovering above about 1/4 inch. And the best way to get the icing to stop, you'll notice at the end of the line, I release pressure at the same time I press down and pull up. So that just takes practice. And that's why I love to begin with this activity, because it will get you warmed up and familiar with how the icing behaves. Just like anything you do, the more you practice, the better you'll get. So whether this is the first time you've ever decorated cookies or the 20th time, it's always great to just warm up. Get your fine motor skills in check. The icing just follows along. You're showing it the way. And if I'm moving too fast for you, please feel free to press pause, take your time, and really practice the control that you have. Here come the circles. Circles are one of the hardest shapes to do, so you really want to just take your time. Hope you're all doing well at home. I should have mentioned it sooner, but if the icing is not coming out in such a way that it's covering the line, or if it's choppy and kind of splitting, that would be a sign to just trim it a little bit more. So if you see how my icing is covering up the lines here, that's about the thickness that I prefer using for the piping bags. There we go. So that's a little bit of a warm up. Press pause if you need to finish. It's really important to get warmed up before we move on. So now that we're done with our practice sheet, we're gonna move on and get our cookies ready. So let's cut them out of the cellophane bags. We have a lot of different floral cookies here today. So I don't know if you can identify the different types of flowers that are shown in the pictures, or in the picture of our set. Depending on how you place the cookie, it can look like a number of things. So we have a bunch of different florals. We also have the mason jar. We have a little sprig, a little greenery there. So we've got a bunch of different things that will be all sorts of beautiful colors. Let's get our bags trimmed now too. So we have the one trimmed from doing our practice sheet. I'm just going to do a little snip on the other bags, get those all ready to go, so nothing gets in the way when I start doing the outlining. And we won't need our sprinkles quite yet, so I'm gonna just set those aside. I think the sprinkles will look really cute as like the center of the daisy. I'm really bad with flower names, so if I don't call them by the right name and you are a flower person, I apologize in advance. All right, so we've got our supplies ready. One pointer I want to mention before we get started, the toothpicks are a wonderful tool for scraping off any mistakes. So if you do any piping on your cookies that you're not happy with, the toothpick will just wipe it right off and you can have a fresh start. So be sure to do that. All right, I'm going to have you begin with the mason jar. So as I make color choices, feel free to do anything that you'd like to do. I'm just going to be doing it the way the picture shows, but you can have creative freedom and do whatever you'd like. So on the mason jar, there are those little ripples at the top there. And so we're following along the shape of the cookie as we work our way around. And what I'm trying to do here is get the icing as close to the edge of the cookie without going over. So I'm trying to go right up to the edge, but it still needs to be on the top of the cookie. Otherwise, the icing is just going to slip off the cookie as we flood them. So we're using the same technique that we did on the practice sheet as we apply the icing here. And we just go all the way around the cookie to give it a border. We're putting a border on the cookies so that we can put our icing into the center in a bit. All right, actually I'm gonna keep using the blue here as I outline this next cookie. This is going to represent like a little bit of a sprig of greenery, but I think it'll look really pretty to have this color of blue in the background. So we're just following along the shape of the cookie. Work your way all around. If there's any line you're not satisfied with, or if it slips off the edge, scrape it off and start again. This is really the foundation of the rest of your work, so you'll want to be satisfied with how the lines all come together. All right, the next flower here, we're going to outline it in purple. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of a leaf coming off the edge there. So I'll show you what to do when we get there. So we're going to work our way around the cookie. There really isn't any right or wrong place to start when you outline a cookie. Just working my way around. I'm going to leave an area here for the leaf. So see how I just notched that out a bit? Now I'm going to just pipe a green edge here. And that's where the leaf will go. All right, I'm going to shuffle the cookies around very carefully. I'm just going to touch the center of the cookie and move them aside. The reason why we're moving them out of the way is because I like to work on cookies when they're closer to my body. I feel like my fine motor skills are better when they're closer to me, as opposed to reaching up and across the table. So you might want to try that too. All right, next for this pretty daisy, I'm gonna use the peach. Use any color you'd like. And it's a nice repetitive pattern. We're just gonna go all around the cookie. All right, next, so this next one here, it's like a rose. And so I want you to have that flat portion at the top. Maybe now you can see there's a little leaf at the lower area here. So I'm going to go across the top. And you might want to just watch this one first before you jump in. That way you can see how this one will come together. You try and just keep it the flower area like that, and then you add on the green. So there's a green leaf at the lower area here, and then there's a green stem. So this is the bottom of the flower here. I think I'll connect that. There we go. And then we have our tulip. So let's do the top first. But you really can start anywhere. I'm just starting at the top. We're going to make a nice floral bouquet. Spring flowers are so exciting. I'll do a little green stem here at the bottom. All right, so now that we've just done all that, we've completed step one, which is our outlining. All right, so now that we have just completed our outlining, we're gonna shuffle our cookies around again. As we let those lines dry, they become just a more solid border for us to allow the flooding to really stay in the center. And then we're going to use the same icing we just outlined with, but we're going to trim the bags just a little bit more, because that's going to help us to be able to flood them a little bit faster, especially the blue. That mason jar cookie is a pretty large cookie. I might not actually even trim my green anymore because we only need the green for some little things. And be careful, if you get any, if you trim the bag over the cookies like I just did, you might get a little bit of plastic on it. So you want to make sure to get that out before you flood them. That way when you eat your cookies, you're not eating plastic. Got my purple and my peach, just a little bit more. I'm not trimming off much at all, just a little snip. All right, so when we flood our cookies, we're just applying a lot of icing to cover the whole cookie, and then we're gonna use our toothpick to kind of push it around. I'm gonna have you start with this cookie here because the mason jar is such a large cookie. I don't want to teach flooding on such a big cookie to start. So we're gonna start with this one here. So as you flood, you are holding the bag in the same way. The goal is to apply a lot of icing onto the cookie as quickly as you can. Now it's not a race, but you do want to move quickly because the icing does start to dry and we want to be able to move it all around the cookie and push it up to the edge before it crusts over and dries all the way. So I like to start by doing about that much on the cookie, And then I use a toothpick to go right up to the edge. This icing is pretty tall on this cookie. I applied a lot of icing because I love for it to look puffy, and who doesn't love a lot of icing on their cookies? So I'm just working my way around, making sure there is plenty of icing. You don't want to see your cookie at all through the icing. So it should be really thick. It might seem like too much icing, but it's not. All right, so once I see that none of my cookie is peeking through the outline, you can move on. Sometimes I like to tap my cookie gently a couple times like that, and it gets it to just level out and settle down. All right, so let's keep our flooding technique going. If you feel comfortable now, we can keep using that blue and move on to the mason jar. There really is no right place to start on the cookie. The goal is just once you start, just apply as much icing onto the cookie as you can, as quickly as you can. The icing will start to dry and crust over, so we just want to keep going. It's important not to stop flooding the cookie in the middle of it. Like if you get a phone call or a text or something, you just don't want to step away from the cookie while you're working on it. I always use a toothpick for all of the fine touches and just pushing it right up to the edge. Now, if you put on too much icing, it might start to drip off over the outline. And that's not a bad thing. You can always scrape it off after it dries a little bit and it'll be just fine. I see that I put just a little too much over here. And so I'm going to see if I can just push it back up a touch. The icing has a little bit of motion to it, so it's just moving as you move your toothpick. So it's easy to correct in this stage here. So I pushed it back a touch, and then I'm just going to do a little tap to get it to settle down. There we go. And then I can move on and let it be. I'm just letting them rest. All right, so for our flower, there is a little bit of a marbling technique in the back. And so here's how we're going to bring this cookie to life and give it a little bit of depth and dimension. So I'm going to start by adding some purple, but not as much purple as I would normally flood a cookie, because I'm going to add some layers of some blue into here too. So I'm going to leave a lot of pockets. So I'm going to put about that much purple on. The ratio on this is really up to you. This is just fun to see how you can kind of blend two different colors together and give it a unique pattern in the background. So I am just applying blue around this purple. And then after I have that on, I'm going to do the same sort of toothpick work here as I just make sure I get it up to the edge. And I am going to start to swirl it here in a moment. It's almost like a tie-dye effect, but really you're just swirling it. And I don't know, I think it's a beautiful way to just make the background look different. We will be doing some detailing on the top of this to add even more of a unique look, because every flower is different. There we go, a little bit of a swirl. See how the two colors blend together and you just have a really fun background. There's that. All right, and then there's that little leaf area. I didn't trim my green anymore, and I don't think I needed to. This is just right. If you trimmed your green, that's absolutely fine. But since this is such a small area, we really didn't need to trim more. You have better control when the bag is small, but the problem is the icing just won't come out as quickly. There we go. All right, so we're going to shuffle our cookies around very carefully. I really don't want you to handle these cookies that you've just flooded because they can easily get dented. So it's easier to pick up the cookies that are only outlined right now. The other ones, just be so careful as you scoot them aside. All right, so we've got our next round ready. Are you ready to go? Let's do this. I think flooding is such a fun part of the process, and I hope you're enjoying it too. You definitely want to work at your own pace, so if I'm moving too fast for you, please press pause so you can enjoy the process. I don't want you to rush. I always like to set the bag down as I use a toothpick to push the icing up to the outline, because holding onto that piping bag, if you aren't holding it upside down, it could potentially drip onto your cookies. So be really careful if you are holding that piping bag in your other hand. The icing will just drip out when you least expect it. There we go. We can move on to the rose. This is making me excited for all these springtime flowers. There we go. I wish I could peek into the camera and see you guys. I hope that you'll send us a picture of your cookies in the end or tag us, because it's always so fun to see your work. While I have this green, I'm just going to add this little stem over here. I don't know about you, but when I get to the end of the flooding, I always get a little sad because it's so relaxing and fun to do. I love these colors. When you're spreading out the icing, be sure you look all around the cookie. It's easy to miss a little spot. You'll want your flood icing to go right up to or a little bit over your piped outline. Just like that. Now, at the end of this stage, I like to give the cookies a little bit of drying time so that they can really crust over before we add the details. So it's great if you can finish your flooding and then press pause on the video. You can have about 10 minutes or so to let them just dry before we add the finishing touches. welcome back. So we've let our cookies sit for a bit, they've crusted over, they're ready for the final touches. So before we start detailing, something that I like to do is rebag any of the piping bags that I've cut extra large. And I start fresh with a brand new tip that I can trim. So for my bag specifically, I know the blue I've cut very large, and so I'm going to rebag that color. And the way to do that is you open up one of the new piping bags, and off to the side, chop off a pretty big chunk of that bag. It's gonna make it easier for it to come out. You're gonna transfer the icing into the new bag. You place it inside and then you squeeze out the icing and transfer it into the new bag. And now you have a fresh start. I tie a knot, and that'll get us ready to go with our detailing. And I'm not going to use the other bag quite yet because I'm not sure if I want to rebag any of the icing. I might do that as I go though. All right, so a good one that I think we're going to start with is, how about we start with this daisy? So the way that we're going to detail this cookie is we're going to take our green icing and try and make a center. So I'm going to make a big circle. The good thing about doing this is that if you're not happy with the shape of your circle, you can kind of keep going until it looks symmetrical. So I just keep going with my drawing until it looks circle-ish. We're just going to make the center of this flower. And after we have a shape that we like, we're going to fill it in. And I'm going to be adding the sprinkles to the center of this flower to give it that seedy look in the center. So I flooded that again, and then we'll take our sprinkles, and they'll stick to the icing when it's wet. So I'm just gonna gently shake some out. You can use your fingers to apply them too, but I'm gonna try to cover that area as best I can. And then any extras can just slip right off. You can even use your toothpick to kind of push them right back on. So there we have that. I'm gonna let this dry just a little bit before I add my petals on. I'm gonna do a little bit more detailing to this cookie in just a bit. So I'm gonna let that set for a moment. And these are just some examples. Don't feel that you need to do it the same way. If you have a different idea, it's great to go for it. Okay, so for this one, we're gonna give it this little swirly look at the top to make it look like it's an opened up rose. There we go. And then on the leaf, I like to go over the edge again, just to give it a little more definition, and give it just this little vein down the center. It all starts to come to life when you apply the icing. All right, the tulip. I'm gonna go around the outside edge again to just bring it to life a little bit more. Really makes it pop. So I'm just tracing over the outside edge here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go across here. There we go. All these extra touches just make it come to life a little bit, I think. So let's shuffle them around very carefully as they're all drying. All right, I'm gonna jump into the center one here, and we're gonna make it look like it has some greenery on top. So the way I like to start this is to just draw a center vein down the middle, and then on each of these areas where we see the shape of the cookie, we're just going to extend like a little bit of a leaf. So I'm drawing these little leaves here. You know how a vase has flowers and then it also has some greenery in it? Just helps to bring in a different color, and that's what these little sprigs are for. And then in each of those areas, we can just kind of fill it in. I left my green small, and it's working out really well. Sometimes I don't even use that second bag for rebagging, but maybe one of your bags is trimmed super large and you might want to rebag it. All right, on this one here, so we've rebagged this, and I'm gonna trim this one on the small side because what I'm going to do is draw some little florals, and we're gonna make it look like a hydrangea. And so there's really no solid answer for how to do this, but what I'm gonna do is just start drawing a lot of flowers in the center. A hydrangea is that beautiful flower that just has so many tiny little flowers on top of it. And so I'm just freehanding a lot of these floral shapes. And what's great is they really just pop on top because the background has the two-toned look. These little starry florals, they just really stand out. So I just keep building on. And in the end, it's just going to look like it has a lot of texture. And you can even make some with 4 leaves. It doesn't have to be the full flower. It's just going to make it look really textured. And this is just one way you can do it. If you've decorated cookies with us before, we've used this shape before. And it can be decorated in a number of ways. So maybe try a different way if you're wanting to go a more classic route. It's like the rounded starfish. We're just making a bunch of flowers on top. I love how the background looks on this. I think that marbled background works so well on this cookie. There we go. So we just added a lot of those little flower shapes on top. Gave it a fun little look. I'm gonna go over, I wipe off the tip of my bag quite a bit as I work when it starts to get full of other icing. So we're just gonna add our leaf to the side. And then on the mason jar. So the mason jar is where we're going to try writing the word hello. Maybe you have a different word. Maybe you want to write the word mom or spring. Mason jars typically have that word, and one of the most popular words on the side of a mason jar is the Ball mason jar. It's like the brand. So we're gonna kind of go with that look, but we're gonna write a word across. Maybe you like to print your letters. Maybe you like to write in cursive. However you do it, I always think it's good to practice. So I think it's best to practice writing the word, maybe on your parchment paper, just to make sure you're familiar with how you're going to do it, what it will look like. So I'm gonna practice writing the word hello. I think writing in cursive is a nice way to use our icing because the icing flows really nicely. I actually think it's a touch easier if you're familiar with cursive writing. I like how the letters are all connected. So try it one more time just to feel that you're in a good groove with how it's going to work. Print writing is also very beautiful on cookies. but there's a lot of starting and stopping. And so I just want you to be comfortable with which route you're going to go before you do it on the cookie. All right? So now that we've done that, we kind of do it at a little bit of a diagonal because that's normally how the ball jars have their writing. And so you always want to be mindful of your space and just remember that the cookie is not super duper wide. You want to use your spacing carefully as you go. And even if you make a mistake, I think it's awesome you're trying it. Now after we have our word done, what I want to do is bring the top to life. So the top of the mason jar, it's almost like its lid. We're going to give it that little bit of a squiggle up there. And I think I'm going to trim this just a little bit more, and I'm going to go along the outside edge of the cookie with a thicker outline. Just like we did our other cookies with that outline. I think it looks neat to have a border. Just makes it pop. So I'm just going along the outside edge. And there we go. And you can always display them. Oh, I don't want to forget about this one. I was just getting ready to talk about displaying them and setting the cookies all around the mason jar to make it look like a vase of cookies. But this one I don't want to forget to do. So we've let the center dry. I just didn't want the green and the peach to bleed together. So what we're going to do is just make some petals in each of these areas. You can turn it as you go if you feel more comfortable with that. Work our way around the cookie. And when we're done, we have this beautiful flower. So there we have it. We've got our fun set of cookies. I am just so grateful that you joined me today. Thank you for jumping on and following along with me. Please feel free to tag me and D is for Delicious in a post if you share your cookies. I'd love to take a look at what you've done. And we're always making new cookie kits, so I hope you'll check back with us and join us another time. Have a great day. Bye.